At 6:14 a.m. on April 14, 1942, Corporal Daniel Hartwell crouched beneath the port wing of Spitfire EN-821 at Tokali Airfield in Malta, watching Flight Lieutenant Peter Marsh climb into a cockpit for a mission Hartwell knew would probably get him killed. The problem wasn't the pilot. Marsh was good, 23 years old, 7 kills, steady hands. The problem was physics. The BF-109s would be at 31,000 feet. Marsh's Spitfire, burning standard 87 octane fuel, would top out around 28,000. That 3,000-foot difference meant the Germans would see him first, dive first, shoot first. Marsh would be dead before he even knew they were there. Hartwell had watched it happen 11 times in the past 3 weeks. 11 pilots. 11 funerals. 11 letters home. The morning air smelled like aviation fuel and limestone dust. The April sun was just breaking over the Mediterranean. Somewhere above the haze, German reconnaissance planes were already circling, counting British fighters, radioing positions back to Sicily. Marsh gave Hartwell a thumbs up. The Merlin engine coughed to life. Black smoke belched from the exhausts. Hartwell stepped back and watched the Spitfire taxi toward the runway. He had an idea, a dangerous, unauthorized, court-martial-worthy idea. But Marsh was going to die if Hartwell didn't try something. Daniel Hartwell was 24 years old, a mechanic's son from Sheffield. Before the war, he'd worked in his father's garage, rebuilding motorcycle engines and tuning racing bikes for weekend competitions at Donington Park. He'd enlisted in the RAF in October 1939. Not as a pilot. His eyesight wasn't good enough. Ground crew, engine maintenance. He was fine with that. He understood engines better than people anyway. Hartwell had arrived in Malta in January 1942, 3 months ago. He'd been told he was lucky to get the posting. Mediterranean weather, historic island, strategic importance. Nobody mentioned they were sending him to die. Malta was under siege. The island sat 90 miles south of Sicily, directly in the path of Axis supply convoys heading to North Africa. Churchill called it unsinkable aircraft carrier. Hitler called it a thorn that must be removed. Every day, German and Italian bombers came. Every day, the handful of British fighters scrambled to intercept. Every day, more pilots died. Hartwell's job was keeping the Spitfires flying, patching bullet holes, replacing damaged engines, scavenging parts from wrecked aircraft, working 18-hour shifts in underground maintenance hangars carved from solid rock. He was good at it. By March, he could swap out a Merlin engine in 4 hours. He knew every quirk of every aircraft in the squadron. But he couldn't fix the one problem that was killing pilots every single day. The Spitfire Mark V, Malta's primary fighter, had a service ceiling of approximately 28,000 feet when burning standard 87 octane fuel. The aircraft could physically climb higher, but the engine lost power rapidly above that altitude. The air was too thin. The fuel mixture wasn't optimized for extreme altitude performance. The German Bf-109F, meanwhile, could operate comfortably at 31,000 feet, sometimes higher. That 3,000-foot advantage was everything. German fighters would loiter above the Spitfire's ceiling, watching, waiting. When British pilots climbed to intercept bombers, the 109s would dive from above, invisible against the sun, attacks over before the Spitfires could react. It wasn't combat. It was murder. The RAF knew about the problem. Engineers back in England were working on it. Higher octane fuel was in development. Modified superchargers were being tested. New engine variants were on drawing boards. But none of that helped the pilots dying over Malta right now. Hartwell had read the technical bulletins. The fuel shortage was global. The 100-octane fuel that could solve the altitude problem was reserved for long-range bombers and special operations. Malta got 87 octane. Standard grade. Adequate for operational requirements. Adequate for dying, Hartwell thought. The first pilot Hartwell knew personally who died from the altitude problem was Pilot Officer Robert "Bobby" Keane. 21 years old. From Dublin. Red hair, quick smile, loved American jazz music. He'd borrowed Hartwell's portable gramophone 3 times to listen to Duke Ellington records in the crew quarters. March 24, 1942, 14:30 hours. Keane had scrambled with 3 other Spitfires to intercept a raid. The bombers were at 18,000 feet. Easy interception. But the 109 escorts were at 32,000. Hartwell listened to the radio chatter from the maintenance hangar. He heard Keane report visual contact with the bombers. He heard the flight leader call out the 109s diving from above. He heard Keane's transmission cut off mid-word. The Spitfire crashed into the sea 3 miles off Grand Harbor. They never recovered the body. Hartwell went to the funeral service, stood in the back, listened to the chaplain talk about sacrifice and duty, watched them fold the Union Jack. He went back to work and tried not to think about the gramophone still sitting under his bunk with Keane's records on. The second pilot was Flight Sergeant Thomas Wright, 32 years old, from Manchester, married, 2 daughters, ages 4 and 6. He carried their photograph in his flight jacket pocket. He'd shown it to Hartwell once, while Hartwell was patching cannon damage in his Spitfire's wing. April 3, 1942. 08:20 hours. Wright had been chasing a Junkers 88 bomber. He'd gotten close, lined up the shot. Then a 109 dropped out of the sun from 33,000 feet. Wright never saw it coming. The 109's cannons tore through Wright's cockpit. The Spitfire nosed over and went straight down. It hit the ground near Mdina. The impact crater was 12 feet deep. Hartwell was part of the recovery team. They found the photograph. It had survived somehow, still in the flight jacket pocket. The edges were burned, but the faces were visible. 2 little girls smiling at the camera. Hartwell gave it to the squadron leader. He didn't know what else to do with it. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those girls. They didn't know yet. Their father had died that morning, and they were probably playing, laughing, living their lives. They wouldn't find out for weeks. The letter would arrive. Their mother would cry. Their world would end. All because Wright's Spitfire couldn't climb 3,000 feet higher. Hartwell lay in his bunk and stared at the rock ceiling. There had to be something he could do, some way to get more power from the engines, some modification that would let the Spitfires reach the altitude where the 109s hunted. He started thinking about fuel. The technical issue was straightforward. Aircraft engines produce power by burning fuel mixed with air. At high altitude, the air is thinner, fewer oxygen molecules per cubic foot. Less oxygen means less efficient combustion. Less efficient combustion means less power. The Merlin engine in the Spitfire used a supercharger to compress thin air at altitude, forcing more oxygen into the cylinders. But the supercharger could only do so much. Above 28,000 feet, even with maximum supercharger boost, the engine couldn't produce enough power to maintain climb performance. The fuel mattered too. Octane rating measured a fuel's resistance to premature detonation under compression. Higher octane fuel could withstand higher compression ratios and more aggressive supercharger boost without detonating incorrectly. That meant more power at altitude. 7-octane fuel was the standard. It worked fine at medium altitudes, but it limited high-altitude performance. 100-octane fuel could transform the engine's capabilities. With higher octane, the supercharger could run at higher boost pressure without causing engine knock. More boost meant more air. More air meant more power. More power meant higher operational ceiling. The solution was obvious. The problem was supply. Britain produced 100-octane fuel, but in limited quantities. Strategic bombers got priority. Coastal Command got second priority. Fighter Command in England got third priority. Malta got whatever was left over, which was nothing. The April 8th supply convoy from Alexandria had brought medicine, ammunition, and 43 tons of 87-octane aviation fuel. No stud octane. The fuel allocation form listed Malta's requirement as adequately met with standard-grade supply. Hartwell had seen the paperwork. He'd wanted to set it on fire. He approached his commanding officer, Flight Lieutenant Davies, on April 9th. "Sir, about the fuel situation." Davies held up a hand. "Already pursued it, Corporal." Supply command says 100 octane allocation is fixed. Malta isn't authorized. But sir, if we had even a small amount, we could mix it with the 87 octane. Raise the effective octane rating. Give the engines more power at altitude. I'm aware of the chemistry, Hartwell. The answer is no. We don't have 100 octane. We can't get 100 octane. The discussion is closed. Hartwell tried again. What if we could source it locally? Salvage it from what? There's no 100 octane on the island. The Navy uses diesel. The Army uses petrol for vehicles. We have what we have. Sir, Davy's voice hardened. Corporal, I have 6 operational Spitfires and 4 pilots healthy enough to fly them. I need you maintaining those aircraft, not chasing fantasies. Dismissed. Hartwell saluted and left. But he couldn't let it go. He started asking questions, talking to other ground crew, checking inventory lists, looking for anything on the island that might contain high-octane fuel or octane-boosting additives. On April 11th, he found something. The Navy maintained a small torpedo maintenance facility at Califrana. Torpedoes used specialized fuel for their compressed air engines. Hartwell knew from his father's racing days that torpedo fuel sometimes contained benzene or toluene, aromatic hydrocarbons with very high octane ratings. He walked to Califrana. It took 2 hours. He found a Navy petty officer named Sullivan working on a damaged torpedo. Question, Hartwell said. What's the octane rating on torpedo fuel? Sullivan looked up. Why? Curiosity. It's not gasoline. It's a toluene-based mixture, probably equivalent to 120 octane if you want to compare. Why? Hartwell felt his pulse quicken. How much do you have? 3 damaged torpedoes with fuel still in them. Maybe 80 liters total. But we're not authorized to release it. Navy property. What if I could trade for it? Sullivan raised an eyebrow. Trade what? Hartwell thought fast. Cigarettes. American cigarettes. 2 cartons. American cigarettes were worth more than currency in Malta. The supply convoys rarely brought them. Everyone wanted them. Sullivan considered. 3 cartons. Deal. Hartwell didn't have 3 cartons of American cigarettes, but he knew someone who did. A sergeant in the Army who ran a semi-legal trading network. Hartwell traded his watch and his father's leather jacket, the only valuable possessions he had, for 3 cartons of Lucky Strikes. He brought them to Sullivan on April 12th. Sullivan gave him 4 Jerry, cans filled with toluene drained from the damaged torpedoes. 82 liters. This stuff will eat through seals if you're not careful, Sullivan warned. Don't put it in any fuel system without testing compatibility first. Hartwell nodded. He carried the jerry cans back to Takali, hid them under a tarp in the maintenance hangar. Now came the hard part. The same day Hartwell acquired the toluene, Flight Lieutenant Peter Marsh nearly died. April 12, 1942. 11:45 hours. Marsh scrambled with 2 other Spitfires to intercept a bomber formation. The bombers were at 19,000 feet. The 109 escorts were at 31,000. Hartwell listened to the radio. Marsh. Tally-ho, engaging bombers. Flight leader. Watch above, 109's diving. Marsh. Evading, braking left. The transmission dissolved into static and heavy breathing. Then Marsh's voice came back, strained, gasping. Marsh. Can't climb. He's above me. Can't get angle. Flight leader. Dive away, Peter. Get low. Marsh. Trying. He's following. Still on me. 20 seconds of silence. Then, Marsh. I'm hit. Engines losing power. Heading back. The Spitfire limped home. Smoke trailing from the engine cowling. Marsh made an emergency landing. The aircraft rolled to a stop at the end of the runway. Hartwell ran to the aircraft. Marsh was slumped in the cockpit, blood on his sleeve, face pale. You're hit, Hartwell said. Grazed my arm. I'm fine. Marsh's hands were shaking. I had the shot. Perfect shot on the bomber. Then the 109 came down and I couldn't do anything. I tried to climb, tried to get him off me, but the engine just wouldn't give me the power. He sat up there and shot me to pieces. Hartwell looked at the Spitfire. 23 cannon holes, tail section nearly severed. Rudder controls shot away. Coolant leaking. "You're lucky you made it back," Hartwell said. Marsh pulled off his flight helmet. His eyes were red. "Bobby wasn't lucky. Wright wasn't lucky. How many more of us die before someone fixes this?" He climbed out of the cockpit, holding his bleeding arm. Medics rushed over with a stretcher. Marsh waved them off. "I can walk." He looked at Hartwell. "Is there anything you can do? Anything at all?" "I'm not afraid to die, Danny. But I want a fair fight. I want a chance." Hartwell thought about the jerry cans hidden under the tarp. "Maybe," he said. "Let me think on it." Marsh nodded. He walked toward the medical tent, still holding his arm. Hartwell turned back to the shredded Spitfire. This aircraft was done. It would take a week to repair. But there were other Spitfires, other pilots, other missions tomorrow. That night, Hartwell ran calculations. Pure toluene had an octane, rating around 120. The 87 octane fuel had a specific gravity of roughly 0.72. Toluene had a specific gravity of 0.87. If he mixed them in the right ratio, he could raise the effective octane rating to somewhere near 100. The problem was compatibility. Toluene could degrade rubber seals and gaskets in fuel systems designed for pure gasoline. Too much toluene could cause engine damage. Too little wouldn't make any difference. He estimated a mixture of 15% toluene to 85%. 87 octane fuel would yield approximately 95 octane equivalent. Not perfect, but significantly better than standard fuel. And the concentration was low enough that seal damage would be minimal. Probably. He didn't know for certain. He wasn't a chemist. He was guessing based on formulas he'd seen in racing magazines and maintenance manuals. If he was wrong, the engine could fail catastrophically. The pilot could crash. People could die. But people were already dying. 11 in 3 weeks. Marsh almost made it 12. Hartwell looked at the jerry cans. 82 liters of toluene. A Spitfire's fuel capacity was 85 gallons, roughly 385 liters. 15% of 385 was about 58 liters. He had enough toluene for one fuel load, one flight, one test. If it worked, he could prove the concept. Get official support. Save lives. If it failed, he'd be responsible for killing a pilot and destroying an aircraft, and he'd face court-martial for unauthorized modification of military equipment, misuse of Navy property, and about 6 other charges he couldn't remember. Hartwell sat in the dark hangar, staring at the jerry cans. He thought about Bobby Keene's gramophone, Thomas Wright's photograph, Marsh's shaking hands and blood-soaked sleeve. The decision was made. He'd do it. April 13th, 1942. 18:30 hours. Hartwell found Flight Lieutenant Marsh in the pilot's quarters, sitting on his bunk, staring at nothing. His left arm was bandaged. He looked exhausted. "How's the arm?" Hartwell asked. "Hurts. Medic says I'm grounded for 2 days." "That's probably good." Marsh shook his head. 2 days means someone else flies my missions. Someone else gets killed instead of me." Hartwell sat down on the opposite bunk. The quarters were carved from solid limestone, cool and damp. 4 bunks, 3 of them empty now. The other pilots were dead or transferred. "Peter," Hartwell said quietly, "what you asked me yesterday?" "About whether I could do anything." Marsh looked up. "Yeah? I might have something. It's not authorized. It's not tested. If anyone finds out, I'll be court-martialed." "What is it?" "A fuel mixture. Higher octane. It should give your engine more power at altitude. Maybe enough to reach 31,000 feet. Maybe more." Marsh leaned forward. "How much more power?" "I don't know exactly. 10%, maybe 15. Enough to make a difference." "You've tested this?" "No." "You're sure it's safe?" "No." Marsh was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" "Permission to modify your aircraft's fuel load for your next mission. And your word that you won't tell anyone where you got the fuel." "If this works, Danny, I'm going to tell everyone. I'm going to tell the whole damn squadron. If it works, I'll deal with that. But if it fails, if the engine catches fire or seizes up or anything goes wrong, I need you to say you didn't know. Say you fueled up normally. Blame mechanical failure. Keep me out of it. I'm not going to lie to protect you. Then I'm not doing it. I can't help you. Marsh studied Hartwell's face. You're serious about this? Yes. You really think this could work? I think you're going to die if nothing changes. So yes, I think it's worth trying. Marsh stood up. He walked to the small window carved in the rock wall. Outside, the sun was setting over the Mediterranean. The sky was orange and purple. Beautiful. Deadly. Bobby was my friend, Marsh said quietly. We went through flight training together. He was supposed to be my best man when I got married. Wright had 2 little girls. Did you know that? I knew. I'm tired of watching people die, Danny. I'm tired of being helpless. He turned around. Do it. Modify my aircraft. I'll fly whatever you give me. You understand the risk? I understand that doing nothing is also a risk. And I'm tired of taking that one. Hartwell nodded. I'll need tonight to prepare the fuel mixture. You're scheduled to fly tomorrow morning? 06:30 patrol. Me and 3 others. I'll have your aircraft ready. Marsh extended his hand. They shook. Thank you, Marsh said. Hartwell left without responding. Gratitude felt premature. April 13th, 1942. 22:30 hours. The maintenance hangar was empty. Most of the ground crew were asleep or working the night shift on the flight line. Hartwell worked alone under a single electric lamp. He'd chosen Spitfire EN-821, Marsh's assigned aircraft. It had been patched and refueled earlier that day. Standard 87 octane, 385 liters. Hartwell needed to drain 58 liters and replace it with pure toluene. That would give him a 15% toluene mixture, roughly 95 octane equivalent, he hoped. His hands shook as he positioned the fuel pump. He'd done this procedure 100 times. Draining and refilling fuel tanks was routine maintenance, but this felt different. Illicit. Criminal. The pump chugged quietly. Fuel drained into jerry cans. 58 liters took 11 minutes. Hartwell paused. Last chance to stop. Last chance to walk away. Fill the tank back up with regular fuel. Forget the whole thing. Nobody would know, except Marsh. Marsh would fly tomorrow with standard fuel, and the 109s would be waiting at 31,000 feet. Hartwell grabbed the jerry cans of toluene. His father's voice echoed in his memory from years ago, back in the Sheffield garage. If you're going to modify an engine, Danny, commit to it. Half measures just break things. He poured the toluene into the fuel tank. The liquid was clear, slightly more viscous than gasoline. It smelled sharp, chemical. 58 liters disappeared into the tank. Done. Hartwell sealed the tank, checked the fuel lines for leaks, checked the seals. Everything looked normal. He stepped back and stared at the Spitfire. From the outside, it looked exactly like every other aircraft in the squadron. Same camouflage paint, same squadron markings, same worn appearance from months of combat. But the fuel tank now contained something no other Spitfire in Malta had. Something that might save Marsh's life or kill him. Hartwell pulled out a piece of chalk and marked the fuselage near the fuel cap. A small X, invisible unless you knew to look for it. So he'd remember which aircraft was modified. He cleaned up the jerry cans, hid the empty toluene containers under the tarp, made sure no evidence remained. The hangar clock read 2318 hours. 7 hours until Marsh's takeoff. Hartwell lay down on a maintenance bench. He tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind ran through every possible failure mode. Fuel contamination, seal degradation, engine detonation, fire, crash. He imagined Marsh's Spitfire exploding on takeoff. Imagined the investigation, the questions, the court-martial, his father's disappointment, but he also imagined the alternative. Marsh climbing, reaching 31,000 feet, seeing the 109s before they saw him. Surviving, at 05:45 hours, Hartwell gave up on sleep. He walked to the flight line, watched the ground crew prepare aircraft for the morning patrol. He said nothing to anyone. At 06:14, Marsh approached his Spitfire. He saw Hartwell standing nearby. Their eyes met. Marsh nodded once, Hartwell nodded back. Marsh climbed in, April 14, 1942. 06:30 hours, 4 Spitfires took off from Takali Airfield. Marsh was flying number 3 position. His aircraft bore the small chalk X near the fuel cap. Nobody else noticed it. The mission was a standard patrol. Protect the island from morning reconnaissance aircraft. Intercept any bombers. Stay alive. Hartwell stood at the edge of the runway, watched the Spitfires disappear into the dawn sky, tried to breathe normally. In the radio hut, he listened to the communications. Flight leader. Red section climbing to Angels 25. Angels 25. 25,000 feet. Standard patrol altitude. High enough to see threats coming. Low enough that the engines could maintain power with regular fuel, but not high enough if the 109s were above them. Hartwell waited. 15 minutes passed. The Spitfires reached patrol altitude, circling over the island, watching the sea. Nothing yet. Then flight leader. Radar reports bandits inbound from Sicily. High altitude. Estimate Angels 30,000 feet. The 109s. Hartwell felt his stomach tighten. Flight leader. Red section, prepare to climb. Intercept course 340. The Spitfires would try to gain altitude. They'd push their engines to maximum boost. Climb as high as they could, but with standard fuel they'd struggle to reach 28,000 feet before the engines lost power. Except Marsh. Marsh had different fuel. Marsh's voice came through the radio. Red 3, climbing. Hartwell listened for any sign of engine trouble. Rough running, misfiring, detonation. Anything that would indicate the modified fuel was causing problems. He heard nothing unusual, just the steady roar of the Merlin engine at full throttle. Flight leader. Red section at Angels 27. Still climbing. One of the other pilots. My engine's losing power. Can't hold climb rate? Flight leader. Same here. Leveling at Angels 28. But Marsh's voice cut in. Red 3 still climbing. Engine strong. Passing Angels 29. Silence on the radio. Then, flight leader. Say again, Red 3. Marsh. Angels 29 and climbing. Engine performance is good. I don't understand it, but I'm not questioning it. Hartwell closed his eyes. It was working. The fuel was working. Marsh. Angels 30. Still have power. I can see the 109s now. 4 bandits, Angels 31, heading 180. Flight leader. Red 3, you're above us. Can you engage? Marsh. Affirming. Going after them. This was it. This was the moment. Marsh was at 30,000 feet with engine power to spare. He could go higher. He could reach the 109s. For the first time in months, a British fighter over Malta had the altitude advantage. Marsh. Angels 32. I'm above the lead 109. He hasn't seen me yet. The tables had turned. The hunter was now the prey. The 109 pilots were used to being invincible at high altitude. They never expected a Spitfire to come from above. Marsh. Engaging. Hartwell gripped the edge of the radio table. Everyone in the radio hut was silent. Listening. Marsh. I'm diving now. 4 seconds of silence. The dive would be steep. Fast. Closing the distance. Marsh. Target in sight. 400 yards. 300. Firing. The sound of Marsh's voice changed. Tighter. Focused. The G-forces from the dive compressing his chest. Marsh. Hits. I'm hitting him. Pieces coming off. Another pilot. Jesus. Red 3 is above them. Marsh. Target smoking. He's rolling. Going down. He's finished. First kill. The modified fuel had just scored its first kill, but the engagement wasn't over. Marsh. Braking right. Second 109 on my tail. No, wait. I'm faster. I'm outclimbing him. That shouldn't be possible. BF 109s had superior climb rate at altitude. Everyone knew that. It was a fundamental tactical reality. Except Marsh was outclimbing him. Marsh. I'm coming around. He can't follow. He's falling behind. The toluene-boosted fuel was giving. Marsh's Merlin engine power the German pilot had never encountered at this altitude. The 109 pilot was fighting the way he always fought, using altitude and climb rate to dominate. But those advantages were gone. Marsh. I've got position. He's trying to dive away. I'm following. Hartwell could hear Marsh's breathing. Heavy. Fast. Adrenaline. Marsh. 300 yards, 250, firing. 2 seconds. Marsh. Hits on the engine. He's burning, spinning. He's going down. Second kill. 2 Bf-109s in less than 3 minutes. The other Spitfire pilots were calling out, trying to catch up, climbing as hard as their standard fuel engines allowed. But Marsh was 3,000 feet above them. Alone. In control. Marsh. Third 109 is climbing away. I'm pursuing. This was reckless. Marsh was outnumbered. The remaining 2 109s could coordinate. Trap him. But Marsh had tasted blood. He had power his enemy didn't. He wasn't backing down, Marsh. I'm at Angels 33, still have power. He can't get away from me. 3,000 feet. Higher than any Spitfire over Malta had ever operated. Marsh. He's turning, trying to engage. I'm turning inside him. In a turning fight, energy management was everything. Radius, speed, power. The Bf-109 usually won these fights at altitude because the Spitfire ran out of engine power. Not today. Marsh. I've got him. He can't outturn me. Firing. 3 seconds. Marsh. Strikes on fuselage and wing. He's breaking off. Diving. Marsh. I'm following him down. 200 yards. Firing again. The Bf-109 pilot was in full retreat now. Diving for the deck, trying to escape, using gravity to build speed. The only advantage he had left. Marsh. Got him. Engine fire. He's finished. Definitely going down. Third kill. 3 Bf-109s destroyed in 4 minutes, by one pilot, at an altitude where Spitfires weren't supposed to be effective. The fourth German pilot had apparently seen enough. He was running, heading back to Sicily at maximum speed. Flight leader. Red 3, status? Marsh. 3 confirmed kills, no damage. Fuel state is good. Returning to Angels 28 to rejoin formation. Hartwell leaned back in his chair. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. It worked. The fuel worked. Marsh had just achieved what everyone said was impossible. He'd climbed above the 109s, dominated them, killed 3 of them, come home without a scratch. Flight leader. Red 3, how the hell did your aircraft climb that high? Marsh. I have no idea, lead. Engine just kept giving me power. I've never felt anything like it. Flight leader. When we land, I want maintenance to inspect your aircraft. Something's different. Marsh. Copy that. The patrol continued. No more bandits appeared. 30 minutes later, the Spitfires returned to Takali. Hartwell watched them land. Marsh touched down smoothly. Taxied to dispersal. Shut down the engine. Hartwell walked over. Marsh climbed out of the cockpit. His face was flushed. His hands were still shaking. He pulled off his flight helmet and stared at Hartwell. What the hell did you put in my airplane? Marsh said. Hartwell glanced around. Other pilots and ground crew were approaching. This wasn't the place to talk. Fuel, Hartwell said. Just fuel. That wasn't normal fuel, Danny. Later, Hartwell said quietly. I'll explain later. Marsh nodded. He understood. But the secret was about to come out. 6 pilots had watched the engagement from below. They'd heard Marsh's radio calls, seen him operating 4,000 feet above where any Spitfire should be able to reach. Watched him kill 3 109s that should have been untouchable. Word spread through the squadron in minutes. By 0800 hours, Flight Lieutenant Davies was demanding answers. He found Hartwell in the maintenance hangar, inspecting EN-821's engine. "Corporal Hartwell," Davies said. His voice was cold. "My office. Now." Hartwell followed him to the squadron headquarters. A limestone building half-collapsed from bombing. Davies's office was a desk in a corner surrounded by sandbags. "Sit," Davies said. Hartwell sat. Davies leaned against his desk. "Flight Lieutenant Marsh just killed 3 Bf-109s at 33,000 feet. In a Spitfire Mark IV burning what was supposedly standard 87-octane fuel. He tells me his engine performed unlike any Spitfire he's ever flown. His exact words were, 'It climbed like it had twice the power.'" Hartwell said nothing. "I'm going to ask you a direct question," Davies continued. "Did you modify the fuel in that aircraft?" Hartwell met his eyes. "Yes, sir." "How?" "I mixed the 87-octane with a high-octane additive, raised the effective octane rating to approximately 95. "What additive?" "Toluene, drained from damaged Navy torpedoes." Davies stared at him. "You put torpedo fuel in a Spitfire?" "Toluene, sir. Not the complete torpedo fuel mixture, just the toluene component, mixed at 15% concentration." "Did you have authorization?" "No, sir." "Did you test this mixture before using it?" "No, sir." "You put an untested fuel mixture into a combat aircraft without authorization, sent a pilot into combat with it, and didn't inform anyone?" "Yes, sir." Davies was quiet for a long moment. Hartwell prepared himself for the court-martial charges: negligence, reckless endangerment, misuse of military property, unauthorized modification of combat aircraft. But Davies didn't arrest him. Instead, Davies said, "Did you log the modification anywhere?" "No, sir." "Does anyone else know besides you and Marsh?" "No, sir." Davies walked to the window, looked out at the airfield. The morning sun was bright. Another raid would come soon. More pilots would scramble. More would die, unless something changed. "How much toluene do you have left?" Davies asked. Hartwell blinked. "Approximately 24 liters, sir." "Enough for more aircraft?" "No, sir. Not at 15% concentration. I'd need at least 200 liters to modify the entire squadron. Can you get more?" Hartwell hesitated. "Possibly. The Navy might have more damaged torpedoes. But the petty officer I traded with knows what I used the toluene for. If he reports it—" "He won't," Davies interrupted. "Not if it's saving British pilots. Can you verify the fuel mixture is safe for extended operations?" "I'd need to inspect EN-821's engine, check for seal degradation, combustion deposits, anything that indicates long-term damage. But so far the engine ran perfectly. No knocking, no overheating, no failures." Davies turned around. "Here's what's going to happen, Corporal. You're going to inspect that engine thoroughly. If it shows any signs of damage, this conversation never happened and you're facing court-martial. But if the engine is clean, you're going to acquire more toluene. You're going to modify every operational Spitfire in this squadron. And you're going to do it quietly." Hartwell stared at him. "Sir? Marsh killed 3 109s this morning. 3. In 4 minutes, at an altitude we couldn't reach yesterday. That changes everything. If we can give every pilot that advantage, we can defend this island. We can turn this siege around. But sir, this is unauthorized. If command finds out, command is in England. We're in Malta. We're dying here. And you just handed us a way to stop dying." Davies's voice hardened. "I'm giving you an order, Corporal. Make it happen." Hartwell stood up, saluted. "Yes, sir." "And Hartwell, this stays between us. No paperwork, no reports, no records. As far as anyone knows, these aircraft are burning standard fuel. Understood?" "Understood, sir." Hartwell left the office. His mind was racing. He'd expected punishment. Instead, he'd received orders to expand the modification. Davies was willing to risk his career to save his pilots. Hartwell went back to the hangar. He had work to do. April 14, 1942. 1400 hours. Hartwell disassembled EN-821's engine. He checked every seal, gasket, and component that had contact with the fuel system. He examined the spark plugs, inspected the cylinder walls. Analyzed combustion deposits. Everything looked perfect. Better than perfect, actually. The combustion chambers were cleaner than they should be. The toluene was burning more efficiently than pure gasoline. The engine was healthy. The modification was safe. Hartwell reported his findings to Davies. Davies gave him 48 hours to acquire more toluene and modify 4 more aircraft. The entire operational squadron. Hartwell went back to Califrana. Found Petty Officer Sullivan. "I need more toluene," Hartwell said. Sullivan looked around to make sure they were alone. "I heard a Spitfire pilot killed 3 109s this morning." "You heard correctly. Someone told me the pilot said his airplane was climbing like nothing he'd ever flown." Hartwell said nothing. Sullivan smiled. "How much toluene do you need?" "At least 200 liters. More if you have it. I can get you 250 liters. But I want something in return." "What?" "Tell me what you're doing with it." "The truth." Hartwell considered lying, considered walking away. But Sullivan already knew, and Hartwell needed the toluene. "I'm mixing it with aviation fuel," Hartwell said. "It raises the octane rating, gives the engines more power at altitude. That's how Marsh killed those 109s. He could climb higher than them." Sullivan nodded slowly. "That's brilliant. Simple. Dangerous. Brilliant. Can you get me the toluene or not?" "I can get it. But I want to help. Let me show your mechanics how to handle toluene safely. It's corrosive. It can cause chemical burns. Your people need to know what they're working with." Hartwell hesitated. Bringing Sullivan into the operation meant another person who could talk, another person who could expose the unauthorized modification. But Sullivan was right. Toluene was dangerous. Hartwell had been careful, but his mechanics needed proper training. "Deal," Hartwell said. Sullivan delivered the toluene that evening. 10 jerry cans, 25 liters each. He spent 2 hours teaching Hartwell's ground crew proper handling procedures, ventilation, skin protection, spill containment. By midnight, Hartwell had modified 4 more Spitfires, the same 15% mixture, the same small chalk X marked near each fuel cap. 5 aircraft total, 5 pilots with a secret advantage. April 15, 1942. Morning patrol. This time, all 5 modified Spitfires flew together. The pilots didn't know about the fuel. They'd been told their aircraft had received routine maintenance. Hartwell listened to the radio. The patrol encountered a formation of Bf-109s at 32,000 feet. 8 German fighters. Flight leader. Red section. Climbing to engage. The Spitfires climbed. This time, all 5 of them reached 31,000 feet. Then 32,000, then 33,000. The 109 pilots saw them coming. But they couldn't climb away. The Spitfires matched their altitude, exceeded it. The engagement lasted 6 minutes. The results were devastating. 5 Bf-109s destroyed. 0 Spitfires lost. 0 Spitfires even damaged. The German pilots broke off and fled. They'd never experienced anything like it. The Spitfires that usually struggled at high altitude had just torn through their formation like they owned the sky. When the Spitfires landed, the pilots were ecstatic. Confused but ecstatic. "Something's changed," one pilot said. "Our aircraft are different. They're faster, more powerful." Flight leader looked at Hartwell. "Corporal, what did you do to these aircraft?" Hartwell glanced at Davies. Davies gave him a small nod. "Special fuel mixtures, sir," Hartwell said. "Higher octane, more power at altitude. Can you do it to all the aircraft?" "If I have enough supply, yes, sir." "Get it done." Word spread through the ground crew immediately. By that afternoon, every mechanic on the base knew about the modified fuel. They wanted to know how to mix it, how to handle it, how to implement it. Hartwell spent the next 3 days training them, teaching the mixture ratio, the safety procedures, the inspection requirements. By April 18th, every operational Spitfire in Malta was burning the modified fuel. Not just at Takali. The secret spread to Hal Far and Lucca, the other 2 fighter bases on the island. Mechanics talked to mechanics. Procedures were shared. Nobody asked for authorization. Nobody filed paperwork. They just did it because it worked, because pilots were surviving, because Malta was finally fighting back. April 20th, 1942. The German Luftwaffe command in Sicily noticed something was wrong. For 3 months, their Bf-109 pilots had dominated Malta's airspace. The altitude advantage had been absolute. Spitfires were targets, not threats. But in the past 6 days, everything had changed. 14 Bf-109s lost. 23 kills credited to Spitfires at altitudes above 30,000 feet. Multiple pilots reporting that British fighters were suddenly operating 3,000 feet higher than previous encounters. Oberst Joachim Müncheberg, one of Germany's top aces and commander of JG-77, personally debriefed returning pilots. "They're above us," one pilot reported. "The Spitfires are coming from above. I don't understand how, but they're reaching 33,000 feet with full combat power." Another pilot. "Their climb rate has changed. I tried to outclimb one 2 days ago. It stayed with me, followed me to 34,000 feet. That's impossible. Spitfires can't do that." Müncheberg studied the reports. Something fundamental had shifted. Equipment upgrade? New aircraft variant? Engine modifications? He sent a priority intelligence request to Luftwaffe Command. Request assessment of potential British aircraft modifications or new model deployment over Malta. The intelligence response came back 3 days later. No new Spitfire variants detected. No evidence of modified engines. Aircraft performance improvements unexplained. Müncheberg didn't believe it. You don't suddenly gain 5,000 feet of operational ceiling without changing something major. But he couldn't figure out what. The German high-altitude tactics stopped working. The 109 pilots could no longer hover above British fighters and pick them off at leisure. Every engagement now was a fair fight, sometimes worse than fair. Malta's kill ratios reversed. In April's first 2 weeks, the Germans had lost 6 aircraft while downing 19 Spitfires. In the second 2 weeks, the Germans lost 22 aircraft and downed only 8 Spitfires. Something had broken in Britain's favor. Back on Malta, the pilots knew exactly what had changed. Flight Lieutenant Marsh had become a squadron legend. By April 25th, he had 17 confirmed kills, 11 of them at altitudes above 30,000 feet. He was Malta's top ace. But he wasn't alone anymore. Every pilot in the squadron was racking up kills. The modified fuel had transformed the tactical situation. British pilots could engage on their terms, choose their altitude, dictate the fight. The mechanics were heroes. Pilots bought them drinks, shared cigarettes, treated them with a respect that ground crew rarely received. Hartwell tried to stay quiet, let the pilots take the credit. But everyone knew, everyone understood who had started it, who had taken the risk, who had figured out the solution while everyone else was following regulations and watching people die. On April 28th, Davies pulled Hartwell aside. "Command is asking questions," Davies said. "They've noticed the kill ratios, the performance reports. They want to know what changed." "What did you tell them?" "I told them our pilots are flying better, improved tactics, better coordination. Nothing about the fuel. They'll figure it out eventually, sir." "I know. But for now, we keep this quiet. If they find out we've been using unauthorized fuel modifications, they'll shut it down. Order us to stop. Confiscate the toluene. Court-martial everyone involved. And pilots will start dying again." Hartwell understood. "How long can we keep it quiet?" "As long as possible. Until the war moves on. Until Malta isn't under siege anymore. Until the fuel modification doesn't matter." Davies paused. "You saved a lot of lives, Corporal. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, you did the right thing." Hartwell nodded. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a mechanic who'd gotten lucky, who'd stumbled onto a solution that happened to work, but the numbers didn't lie. In the 3 weeks before the fuel modification, 37 Spitfires lost, 14 enemy aircraft destroyed. In the 3 weeks after, 11 Spitfires lost, 62 enemy aircraft destroyed. Between 80 and 100 British pilots were alive who would have died without the modified fuel. The strategic balance over Malta had shifted. The siege was still ongoing, but the British were holding. fighting back, surviving. And it had started with one corporal, 4 jerry cans of toluene, and the willingness to break the rules when the rules were killing people. Hartwell went back to work. There were always engines to maintain, fuel to mix, aircraft to prepare. The war continued. But now, Malta had a chance, May 1942. An engineering team from the RAF's Technical Development Unit arrived in Malta. They'd been sent to investigate reports of anomalous performance characteristics in Malta-based Spitfire. Mark versus Command wanted. Answers. Wing Commander Thomas. Grant led the investigation. He was 52 years old, career officer, engineer by training. He designed aircraft components before the war. He spent 3 days inspecting aircraft, interviewing pilots, reviewing maintenance logs. On the 4th day, he called Davies and Hartwell to a meeting. "Gentlemen," Grant said, "I've completed my assessment. Every Spitfire on this island is burning fuel that doesn't match any authorized specification." Hartwell felt his chest tighten. "Here it comes." The court-martial. The end. Grant continued. The fuel is a mixture of standard 87 octane and toluene at approximately 15% concentration by volume. This mixture yields an effective octane rating near 95, possibly higher depending on the toluene purity. Davies said nothing. "This modification," Grant said, "is unauthorized, untested by any official engineering body, implemented without approval from Supply Command, Technical Command, or any other authority." He paused. Looked at Hartwell. "It's also brilliant." Hartwell blinked. "Sir?" Grant pulled out a technical report. "I've run full performance tests on 2 modified aircraft. Dynamometer readings, compression tests, fuel analysis, combustion efficiency measurements. The toluene mixture increases manifold pressure tolerance by approximately 18% at altitudes above 25,000 feet. This translates to a service ceiling improvement of 3,000 to 4,000 feet, depending on aircraft weight and atmospheric conditions." He set the report on the table. "There's no engine damage, no excessive wear, no safety concerns. The mixture is stable, effective, and safe. It should have been part of the original engine specification." Davies leaned back in his chair. "So what happens now?" "That depends," Grant said. "If I file a report stating that unauthorized fuel modifications have been implemented in violation of supply regulations, everyone involved will face disciplinary action. The modification will be shut down immediately. Malta will return to standard fuel. Your pilots will return to dying." He looked at both of them. "Or I can file a report stating that Malta maintenance crews have developed an innovative field modification that significantly improves high-altitude performance using locally available materials. I can recommend official adoption. Fast-track the approval process. Get toluene supplies authorized through proper channels." "But that would require explaining how the modification was developed," Davies said. "Which means exposing the unauthorized testing." "It would," Grant agreed, "unless we blur the details, unless the report focuses on the technical results rather than the development process, unless we say that Malta maintenance crews identified a performance gap and developed a solution through standard field modification procedures." He smiled slightly. "Sometimes, Wing Commander, the official story doesn't need to include every detail." Davies and Hartwell exchanged glances.